Good morning, class. We continue our topic from where we left off the last time. We have already gone over respiroviruses, human parainfluenza virus 1 and 3, rubella, human parainfluenza viruses 2 and 4, genus pneumovirus and metapneumovirus. Today we take up the mumps virus, again from the genus rubella virus. Now, mumps is a very familiar condition to you, I'm sure. This affects children usually between the ages of 5 and 9, though it may take a certain children to contract this in adolescence too. This is an acutely contagious disease which causes non-suppurative inflammation of the parotid glands. Though 1/3 of the population which is infected may be asymptomatic, but those children who come down with the disease, for them it may be an extremely painful condition. Recall the virus structure, and here you can make out the negative sense single-stranded RNA, which is enclosed in a matrix shell and an envelope which has two glycoprotein peptidogers. The heme agglutinin neuraminidase peptidomer, which is seen with mumps, and the F glycoprotein spikes. Because of the presence of heme agglutinin neuraminidase spike, which is present on the envelope of this virus can agglutinate RBCs from many species besides humans, that is guinea pig and fowl RBCs too. And because of the presence of neuraminidase spike, once the agglutination has taken place, it can be eluted by the property of this neuraminidase enzyme at 37 degrees centigrade. So, and this will equally apply when we try to visualize this virus by the help of RBCs for detection of these viruses in either cell cultures or in vitro by heme adsorption. So this property has been exploited for diagnostic and visualization purposes. The F-glycoprotein spikes gives it the property of causing clumping of these viruses together, giving it a giant multinucleated syncytia formation. This syncytia formation will be again diagnostic in vivo and in vitro. So you can see the cytopathogenic effects of this virus as giant multinucleated cells within the tissues when you're trying to diagnose it by direct immunofluorescence or immunofluorescent antibody test, as well as in cell cultures when you're trying to propagate this virus and you're trying to check whether this virus is actually growing or not. There you can make out the syncytia formation and you can make out the growth of this virus. Okay, so we have already discussed this slide, and if you remember, all enveloped viruses, because of the presence of this envelope, makes them extremely susceptible to detergents, to ether, to formaldehyde and UV light, and you can kill them easily, though they are acutely contagious and infectious when they are whole. You can preserve these viruses at -70 or by lyophilization. This virus is present worldwide, and almost all across the world you have this mumps infection, but there is only one serotype which is present across, and these are antigenically extremely stable. Pathogenicity of the virus is amongst children between 5 to 9 years age group, but even adolescents up to 15 years can be infected. In those children who contract this disease later in life, in them the complications are more severe in the form of architis or in the form of very severe meningitis. Usually it causes epidemic parotitis, and it spreads from child to child by either by droplet infection or by contact with contaminated fomites, which are contaminated by either salivary or urinary excretion. The route of infection usually is respiratory by airborne droplet infection. Incubation period is 16 to 18 days, and the virus is secreted in urine. So urine, as I said earlier, is a possible source of infection. So what is this pathogenicity? The virus enters the respiratory tract, grows in the salivary glands, the local lymphoid tissue, spreads to spleen and distant lymph tissue, And primary viremia causes it to spread throughout the body to the testes, to the ovaries, pancreas, thyroid, and salivary glands, causing disease. Though pancreatitis is seen in 10% of the population and testes involvement is less than 4%, yet people who are infected get an extremely inflamed organ and leading to many complications. A single infection, however, confers long life immunity due to immunoglobulin neutralizing antibodies. Viremia lasting 3 to 5 days, resulting in spread to the meninges and to the salivary glands. Salivary glands most commonly, meninges are involved in more commonly in adolescents. Complications: severe aseptic meningitis in adults and orchitis in adult males, which might cause sterility. Now, this sterility is an extremely rare condition because the involvement of testes in adult males is unilateral. So, testicular inflammation and subsequent healing with fibrosis may cause damage to one part of the gland, but since the condition is extremely rare bilaterally, there is the chances of contracting sterility is very rare and infrequent. Pancreatitis is seen in 4% of the males who are infected. Oophouritis and thyroiditis is again a little less common, and the diagnosis of this infection is mostly done clinically. Coming to the lab diagnosis of mumps, we will follow the usual course of viral diagnosis we have discussed earlier. The specimens of choice will be saliva, and that is the most common, and urine, followed by CSF and blood wherever they are indicated. For direct virus diagnosis, we can use immunofluorescence or real-time PCR for detection of viral RNA, which is extremely sensitive. The virus can be cultured or isolated for the first time it has to be isolated from a tissue or a clinical specimen. Then you need to do this on the amniotic cavity, or you can do it on cell cultures, that is the primary monkey kidney cells. HeLa cells and Hep2 cells are also an option. How do you check for the presence of these viruses in the cell cultures? By looking for the cytopathogenic effects, which will cause multinucleated giant cell formation or syncytia. Serology, we will be looking for a 4-fold rise in titer between acute and convalescent sera. The most important aspect of mumps vaccine, prevention in mumps, which can also be given to you as a short note alone, either a short note on mumps or a short note on MMR, or maybe a vaccine for mumps and measles and rubella. So you should be all aware of this. Active immunization is the way to prevent this infection, and the numbers have come down dramatically ever since this vaccination was introduced. This is a live attenuated virus vaccine which is derived by passage in chick fibroblast, given by subcutaneous infection in the age group of 12 to 15 months, much before the virus gets to its population of 5 to 9 years. So the antibody needs to develop much before that, between 12 to 15 months of age. It causes long-term immunity, and protection is generally afforded for 10 years, after which a booster may be given to protect the older males from this infection forever. This can be either given as a mumps vaccine alone or as an MMR vaccine, which is measles, mumps and a rubella vaccine. The strain which is employed is either a Gerald-Lens strain or a Leningrad Zagreb strain, according to whatever company is manufacturing this and maybe using it. We come to the next condition, the measles virus, which is now a Morbilli virus genus. This belongs to the genus Morbillivirus. We have left rubella virus behind now. Now, measles virus is an extremely infectious and an extremely dangerous condition which affects children across the world, and which still even after this vaccine has been introduced for more than 50 years now, claims a lot of lives in developing countries where universal vaccine is still not in place. So similar to all other paramyxoviruses, we have the structure, but one important difference between the mumps virus or the RSV virus is that this peplomar on the surface of the envelope has either an F activity or a H activity. F activity and an H activity, it has no neuraminidase activity. So we have a hemagglutinin spike and a fusion spike, but we do not have any neuraminidase activity in this H spike. So there you will see hemagglutination of RBCs of various species, which will not be eluted once the hemagglutination has taken place. So this is extremely important and needs to be remembered. Antigenically, again, also we have only one serotype across the entire world, and again for resistance this is inactivated by heat, ether, formaldehyde and UV light. Egg inoculation for primary isolation, again an amniotic sac, and for cell culture we have monkey kidney or human amnion cells. Cytopathic effects will show multinucleated syncytium formation with acidophilic nuclear and cytoplasmic inclusion bodies. Now this is very important. You need to remember this because this has a typical appearance and a typical name, which is also called the Worden-Finkeldy cells. Now this is the multinucleated syncytia which is showing acidophilic intranuclear and intracytoplasmic inclusion bodies. This also has certain components of the virion in it. So Worden-Finkeldy cells, important for you to remember, also for your MCQs. The pathogenicity of the measles virus, it causes rubeola or measles. Now this is one of the most contagious respiratory infections which is happening with a rash. So these are the childhood, one of the 5 childhood exanthemas along with mumps, which is one of the most contagious and one of the most deadly along with smallpox and chickenpox. It can nearly affect every person in a given population by adolescents in the absence of immunization programs, and the mode of transmission is a large respiratory droplet which is spread by the airborne route, and this is mostly infectious in the early stages before the rash appears. However, it continues to be infectious even a week after the rash has completely disappeared. However, most infectious before the rash has appeared in the prodromal period. The pathogenesis in the clinical picture, replication is initially in the upper and the lower respiratory tract, followed by lymph node replication. Viremia and growth will happen in a variety of epithelial tissue, leading to an incubation period after 1 to 2 weeks when there is no rash but fever. First of all, the runny symptoms will appear. So first of all, the virus is spreading from the respiratory tract to the lymph nodes, and from the lymph nodes through the blood it is going on to the rest of the body and mostly to the epithelial surfaces. So first of all, the epithelial surface of the respiratory area, which is just 1 to 2 cell thick, will be involved, giving rise to respiratory symptoms. There will be rhinorrhea, there will be runny nose, there will be conjunctivitis and nasal secretions, which will be followed by Koplik spots. Koplik spots are raised bluish white ulceration 2 to 3 millimeter in diameter, and they are seen on the buccal mucosa, especially opposite the lower molar teeth, shortly before the rash onset, and they persist for 1 to 3 days. These Koplik spots contain giant cells, cytoplasmic and intranuclear inclusion bodies, and virion components, followed by a characteristic maculopapular rash extending from the face to the extremities, involving the palms and soles, and this is associated with T cells attacking the virally infected endothelial cells in small blood vessels. Now, these maculopapular rash, it characteristically starts behind the ears, goes to the forehead, through the face, and then spreads downwards to the body. This will remain for around 7 to 10 days or maybe 6 to 7 days, and then it will later disappear in the same order in which it appears. and this will disappear with desquamation. And when it is desquamating, that is when the skin is exfoliating, this patient continues to remain infectious. So we say the patient is infectious a week before the rash appears, at least 4 to 5 days, and a week later after the rash disappears, because those exfoliating skin cells, they can be taken in by respiratory droplets by a susceptible child. There will be lifelong immunity due to immunoglobulin neutralizing antibody. So we have respiratory symptoms for 2 to 3 days, the Koplik spots for another 3 days, which disappear after the onset of the rash, and a maculopapular rash, which lasts for around 3 to 7 days, followed by skin exfoliation. This is what a rash looks like. Tiny raised maculopapular patches all over the body, which are coming from the face down. This is the course of the disease. Now, complications. This is extremely important, since bacterial pneumonia and otitis media, they are the most common complications seen in the children, and they may also be fatal. The bacterial pneumonia, which is contracted as a complication to measles, may claim a child's life also. Giant cell pneumonia in patients with impaired cell-mediated immunity. This is rare, but again extremely fatal. Neurological, post-infectious encephalitis, which appears few days after the rash, that is in a population of 1 after every 1,000, and which is again seen in children which are infected later in life. And then we have this condition called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. Now this can be given to you as a note on its own. Subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, a very rare condition which is taking place, as you can see, after every 1 lakh, you can see just one case, the SSPE, and this is happening 10 to 15 years after the child has been infected, much earlier in life with this infection. This is supposed to be due to some kind of a remnant infection, a remnant persistent infection in the brain, which is continuing to replicate very slowly, a kind of a very slow viral disease which takes around 8 to 15 years, and then there is a progressive demyelination which may claim a life within 3 to 4 years. The laboratory diagnosis, we will follow the same pattern as before. Here we have this. On viral isolation, we can isolate and we can detect this giant cell containing both intranuclear and intracytoplasmic antibody, which we intracytoplasmic body, which we called Worden-Finkeldy cells just a couple of minutes ago. Prevention. Again, in this condition, apart from the active immunization, we have passive immunization, since we discussed that this is an extremely fatal condition if it happens to be very severe. For immunocompromised patients and pregnant women, we can have measles immunoglobulins given intramuscularly within 6 days of exposure to prevent symptoms of measles in 80% of the cases. Once you have a kind of an exposure and the patient is immunocompromised, if the patient is pregnant, then this immunoglobulin can be given within 6 days to prevent measles symptoms 80% of the times. Active immunization, we have measles vaccine, which is again a live attenuated vaccine which is given at the age of 9 months. By subcutaneous injection gives long-term immunity. A monovalent form or an MMR form can also be given along with the rest of the mumps and rubella vaccines at the age of 12 to 15 months. The strain which is employed over here is Edmonston Zagreb strain, which is given in our country. Now this condition, the rubella virus, is not of the paramyxoviruses, but since this is again one of the most common exanthemas, the least infectious, the mildest amongst all the childhood exanthemas. We are discussing this over here itself. This is also called German measles, and this is the mildest of all the common viral exanthems. is a member of a rubyvirus, but not an arbovirus. It is most definitely not a paramyxovirus. And this is in contrast to the paramyxoviruses. It is a positive sense RNA which is enveloped and possesses hemagglutinin ability. German measles again is an acute febrile illness accompanied by rash and lymphadenopathy affecting children and young adults. But what is most significant in this very mild illness is the congenital rubella syndrome, which will cause serious abnormality of the fetus if the mother happens to contract this infection during the first trimester of her pregnancy. Normally, for pathogenesis in clinical picture, we have a droplet infection which causes this virus to replicate in the respiratory mucosa, followed by multiplication in the cervical lymph nodes. After an incubation period of 12 to 23 days, 50% of the time the children will not exhibit any disease. Otherwise, a rash will appear, which generally disappears soon enough, and there is complete recovery with no sequelae. What is important, what we come here now is to congenital rubella, where the child will contract, the fetus will get abnormalities if the mother comes in contact with, is exposed to rubella infection during the first trimester, where there is destructive action of the rubella virus on the fetus at a critical time in development, which will lead to conditions of microcephaly, cataracts, and there will be congenital heart disease. Transiently, the child may also be suffering from growth retardation, anemia, and thrombocytopenia, but these will be permanent defects, the congenital heart diseases, the total or partial blindness caused by cataract or deafness or mental retardation, which is caused by microcephaly. Progressive rubella like panencephalitis may be seen, but the children develops this in its teenage years, and there is again a slow virus disease which causes death within a couple of years. Laboratory diagnosis for this rubella infection during pregnancy and after birth is detection of maternal immunoglobulins or rising immunoglobulin G in serum. Then detection of rubella antigen in the amniotic fluid by direct immunofluorescence. In a newborn child, if we need to detect this rubella, we detect IgM anti-rubella antibodies in the serum by ELISA. If the child happens to be born still, then the virus can be isolated in monkey kidney cells. What is important to prevent congenital rubella is to vaccinate all school children or women in childbearing age before they are anywhere near conception. And pregnancy should be avoided 3 months after vaccination. Should be avoided 3 months after vaccination. And if the maternal rubella infection, God forbid, happens to be confirmed during the first trimester, then therapeutic abortion needs to be advised to the mother. MMR takes care of all three conditions of mumps, measles, and rubella. This is given in 2 doses. The first dose to children in 12 to 15 months of age, and the second can be given as a booster later. Now we come to this last genus which has been added to paramyxoviruses very late, and this is called genus Henipavirus. It contains 2 of the most pathogenic viruses known to humans, that is the Hendra and the Nipah virus. Both viruses are public health concern because of their high mortality, their wide host range, their ability to jump species barrier. And because they are prone to cause laboratory acquired infections, they are classified as biosafety level 4 pathogens. We'll just discuss this very briefly. The Nipah virus, it was first identified during an outbreak of disease that took place in Kampung Sungai Nipah, and that's how it got its name, because it was a region in Nipah, Malaysia in 1998 where this virus was first isolated and identified, and over here the pigs were the intermediate host. Since then, outbreaks have been discovered all over the country, especially in Bangladesh and Siliguri in 2001-2008, and the latest outbreak which we've had in the year 2017. However, in subsequent Nipah virus outbreaks, there were no intermediate hosts. Here, the virus was contracted straight from its natural host, the fruit bats, and the fruit bats contaminated the fruits and the humans picked up those fallen fruits which were contaminated by fruit bats droppings and contracted the infection, and it subsequently spread from human to human because of coming in contact with their secretions. There is no specific line of treatment available. Intensive care support needs to be given, and that is the only option we have.